Greetings all, I'm Aaron Mills, and welcome back to Legacy of the Pink Panther, a 12-part retrospective on the films and cartoons of the Pink Panther franchise. Last time we looked at Peter Sellers' final on-set performance as Inspector Clouseau in Revenge of the Pink Panther, which would be the last Pink Panther film he would do before his death in 1980. However, you can imagine the surprise that audiences had when in 1982 advertising began for a brand new Pink Panther movie, starring Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers died from heart problems in 1980, making his official last film appearance in The Fiendish Plot of Dr. Fu Manchu, where he played both the titular criminal mastermind and his arch-nemesis Nayland Smith, in a movie which, watching it today, makes absolutely no goddamn sense. Fortunately for Sellers' reputation, this lackluster effort was already eclipsed by his previous film, Being There, which was a commercial and critical success. It appeared that Blake Edwards still felt the Pink Panther series could continue, and initially he acquired the rights to Sellers' screenplay Romance of the Pink Panther and offered the role of Clouseau to Dudley Moore, who turned it down. Now, what happened next is largely a matter of speculation, as there's very little information to be found on how the remaining films in the original series came to be. But it seems that Edwards decided to go ahead with the series, this time creating a new character to take Clouseau's place. But to do that, there was going to need to be some sort of transition where Clouseau exited and the new character entered. Of course, as mentioned, Peter Sellers was dead at the time, and audiences made it clear that they didn't want to see anyone else in the role of Inspector Clouseau. So as a director, how do you get around this kind of problem? Well, let's find out as we look at Trail of the Pink Panther. We open once again in the country of Lugash, where the Pink Panther diamond is still on display since its recovery in The Return of the Pink Panther. As we watch, we see that someone breaks into the display room and just takes the diamond without any sort of problems or alarms going off. This does not bode well. After the obligatory animated opening titles, this time dedicating the film to Peter Sellers, we see Clouseau once again visiting the shop of Professor August Balls, this time played by Harvey Korman.
You have to go with this.
Well, we'll find something. This will keep you very warm, too. This has a nice effect. With that, no,
No, that is too legal.
too legal.
Yes, I want something that is sort of...
Get something illegal here.
How
Yes.
can I say?
Leave it to Dr. Ball.
Oh, August.
Ah.
August.
Yeah.
Look what you have done.
You like it?
You're a genius.
Yes. We need
What?
something.
There's
Something is
missing.
missing. Yes.
What have you done?
I know what's missing. Here are some teeth on the house.
Let me
See
just...
how they look.
Perfect! Perfect.
Look at
If you think you've seen this disguise before, well, you'd be right. And you'll have also figured out how Blake Edwards got around the inconvenience of Peter Sellers being dead. Nearly all of Sellers' scenes in this movie are taken from stuff that ended up on the cutting room floor in the previous movies, mostly from The Pink Panther Strikes Again. In fact, some scenes get outright repeated, like this one.
Dancing in the eyes, just dancing in the eyes. What a wonderful feeling.
Of course, once word gets out that the Pink Panther has been stolen again, the government of Lugash requests Clouseau's aid, much to the dismay of Dreyfus, who now has high blood pressure on top of everything else.
Let the president of Lugash worry about his blood pressure for a while.
He's not going to Lugash.
What?
He's booked on the 12:15 flight to London.
To London?
He suspects the Phantom to be responsible for the robbery. And he said that since Sir Charles lives in England...
Sir Charles Lytton lives in the south of France.
Well, yes, sir. Shall I tell him?
Don't bother. He would just say, I knew that. Trying to talk sense to Clouseau is like Einstein trying to explain relativity to a minky.
After an incident involving the cigarette lighter in Francois's car, Clouseau sends word ahead to Scotland Yard that he'll be arriving in disguise. Which leads to this. Yeah, I'm starting to see why this footage was cut from the other movies. In fact, that's really the main problem with most of the first half of the movie. Most of the footage with Sellers is stuff that drags on for too long, does nothing to advance the plot, and worst of all, it's not particularly funny. And most of the bridging stuff isn't up to par either. It's just the usual bits of Dreyfus having his usual breakdown, but even these don't seem to work. And the plot points are crammed into the movie with little to no subtlety whatsoever. I mean, take this, for example.
What can I do for you, Inspector?
Well, it's about Inspector Clouseau. MI5 called and reported that Libyan agents heard a rumor that there might be an assassination attempt against Clouseau.
Really? Who else wants to kill him? Tell me, where is he now?
At his hotel. Now, I think you should call him and order him back to Paris until we verify this rumor one way or another. Under no circumstances allow him to go to Lugash.
Of course, asking Dreyfus to do anything to ensure Clouseau's safety is like asking a starving shark to not eat everything in its path. After an admittedly funny bit involving Clouseau and the phone in his hotel room, he gets a message from Dreyfus telling him to leave for Lugash immediately.
To the airport, my good man, and drive like the wind.
Right.
I knew that.
No, that was not Peter Sellers' voice. In fact, if you look closely at the shot of Clouseau outside the hotel, you'll see that this most likely isn't even Peter Sellers. No, in this case, the voice was provided by famed comedian and impressionist Rich Little, who, honestly, a lot of his impressions can be really hit or miss, and with Clouseau, he missed big time. Where he succeeded more, actually, is in doing the voice for David Niven. Now, David Niven by this point had contracted ALS, and while he was healthy enough to shoot his scenes for both this movie and the next one, by the time post-production rolled around, he wasn't able to actually get into the booth to do the ADR. So they tapped Rich Little to dub in Niven's lines for him. And they work a hell of a lot better than his Peter Sellers doing Inspector Clouseau here. You'll see what I mean in a minute. However, it seems the president of Lugash was a little hasty in calling for Clouseau.
And the insurance companies?
The ones which have already paid our government's claim of $12 million for the theft of the Pink Panther. What will they shower you with?
Why didn't you mention this before I sent for Clouseau?
Because you didn't tell me till just now that you'd requested assistance from somebody else's police force.
Well, maybe we can withdraw the request.
Not we, Mr. President. You. Only you can't.
Huh?
Clouseau's plane at this very minute is winging its way to Lugash.
Perhaps he won't find the Pink Panther.
Perhaps he won't reach Lugash.
Shortly after this, Dreyfus gets a call at his psychiatrist's office with some bad news. Well, bad news for everyone else. For Dreyfus, this is the call he's been waiting for 6 movies.
You see before you a man reborn, cured, sane, sound as a Swiss franc.
The phone call was good news?
Wonderful news. Clouseau's plane is overdue and presumed lost into the sea. Lost into the sea and out of my life forever. I'm going to wash that man right out of my head. I know. Mary Martin, South Pacific. I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair. I'm going to wash that man right out of my hair.
And here's where we reach the real problem with this movie. With Clouseau missing, that still gives us a full hour of the movie left to get through. And it's at this point where what little plot there is just gets abandoned and the movie more or less turns into a clip show. Our main character now becomes journalist Marie Jouvet, played by Joanna Lumley, who is doing a story on Clouseau given his disappearance. She spends the rest of the movie talking to Clouseau's friends and acquaintances about him. Obviously, Dreyfus is first, and he obviously struggles to get through the interview without cracking.
Then you think he was a good detective?
He was, I think he was, you can't just say he was, There are no words to describe what he really was.
After a rehash of the fight with Kato from the Pink Panther strikes again, the movie settles down into its full clip show format. As Marie interviews Kato, we see more clips from the other fights in the series. After this, Francois calls on the phone and tells Marie that he has located Hercule LaJoy, who, if you don't remember, was Clouseau's partner in A Shot in the Dark. Now, that of course leads to more clips from that movie, but rather than go over that, I'd rather point out something which I hadn't realized until I did research to begin this retrospective. Graham Stark, who plays LaJoy, has actually had a role in every single Pink Panther film going forward from A Shot in the Dark, with the exception of Inspector Clouseau. So he's been in Return, he's been in Strikes Again, he's been in Revenge, he's in this movie, he's in the next movie, and he's in the last movie of the original series. LaJoy suggests to Marie that to get the real story on Clouseau, she should talk to the crooks he caught, or didn't catch. Speaking of which, Marie's investigation has come to the attention of the current French godfather, Bruno Langlois, played by Robert Loggia.
Whoa, Robert Loggia!
Thank you. Bruno puts a tail on Marie in an effort to make sure that her research doesn't accidentally cause Clouseau to return, since business has been booming since his disappearance. Meanwhile, it's time for another round of clips as Marie pays a visit to Sir Charles and Simone Lytton. And yes, this time it is David Niven and Capucine reprising their roles for the first time since the original Pink Panther back in 1963. And no, we get absolutely no explanation for the discrepancy between Lady Simone Lytton and Lady Claudine Lytton as seen in The Return of the Pink Panther. Much like Dreyfus's unexplained resurrection, you're just going to have to roll with it. However, Marie does helpfully fill in a few details about what happened after the events of the first movie.
In May 1964, you divorced Inspector Clouseau, and a year later,
I married the man of my dreams.
Who was that, darling?
Oh, you know, that fellow Clouseau accused of being the notorious Phantom.
Oh, him. Oh, you have to forgive her. She's not very good on names.
Anyway, he's terribly attractive.
But she has impeccable taste.
After a few more clips, Sir Charles actually defines for us why it is that despite being a complete and utter moron, Clouseau always managed to get us in the audience on his side.
Men like Clouseau never die. They're indestructible. And that's the way it should be.
why?
Well, we need them. They help us preserve our sense of humor. And they're living proof that however bad things get, if you persevere, you survive, and sometimes even win.
So you think determination was the key to his success?
No question about it. He was a fool, but he epitomized the 11th commandment.
The 11th commandment?
Thou shalt not give up.
I actually have nothing to add to this. That whole bit just sums up the essence of Clouseau's character in the best way that anyone could. It's actually kind of uplifting in a really bizarre way. When she gets into her cab, the driver drives past Marie's hotel and indicates that the men in the car following them insisted he take her somewhere else. Specifically, to see Bruno.
I knew you were going to threaten me, but I didn't know how I was going to react. And you know something? I've surprised myself.
Is that right?
Yes, instead of scaring the wits out of me, you have made me angry. In fact, I can't remember when I've been so angry. I'm a member of the press, and I will not be intimidated by you or by anybody else.
Hey, now it's being melodramatic.
You call this melodramatic? Wait till I get home.
What are you going to do?
Faint or throw up. Maybe both. I won't know till I get there.
8 to 5, it's throw up.
You've got a bet.
She reports the kidnapping to Dreyfus, but since she has no proof and Bruno has plenty of influence, Dreyfus refuses to arrest Bruno. This sets Marie off again, and she states she's going to tell the story on the news that night, which triggers the Dreyfus eye twitch.
I'm going to go directly to my office, where I shall write my next broadcast about a mafia boss who kidnapped me and about the chief inspector of the Sûreté who refused to do anything about it.
In my opinion, that would be most unwise.
What it boils down to, Inspector, is I don't trust your opinion.
Well, it looks like it's not just Clouseau who knows how to push Dreyfus's buttons. Anyway, that night after her broadcast, where Marie reveals that the more she learns about Clouseau, the more people seem to want her to stop looking for him, she calls Kato, who appears to actually be out of the country.
Inspector Clouseau's residence, Kato speaking. I've gone to Miami Beach to spend Chinese New Year with my maternal grandmother. Leave a message after the bleep.
With Kato gone, Marie decides to have a look around Clouseau's apartment, where she gets an unexpected surprise. honestly, in terms of Kato fights, this one isn't bad. Marie holds her own and pretty much manages to get Kato to inflict most of the damage on himself. And things come to an end, as they always do, with a phone call.
I'm sorry.
I'm used to it.
This is Professor Auguste Bols of Paris, you oriental picaroon. You can't fool me about a plane crash. He is hiding to avoid payment. Unless I receive 4,000 francs by Friday, I'm suing. And you can put that in your opium pipe and smoke it, you conniving Cantonese.
Who the hell is Professor Auguste Bols?
Inspector Clouseau's official disguise maker. Hey, what's a picaroon?
A cheat.
Oh, that's great.
Being called a cheat?
Some of my best friends are picaroons. I could use an aspirin.
You see, I telephoned before, and I really thought that you'd gone to visit your grandmother in Miami.
Miami Beach. She runs a bingo parlor. She's a real picaroon.
I really like this scene, mostly because it gives Burt Kwok something to do in his role as Kato beyond the usual sneak attacks. Here we get to see that Kato is actually very intelligent, very charming, and kind of witty. And pretty much, this is an expansion on the development that we got for him in the last movie. And there's actually more to come as we go on. Marie shows Kato the photo album she found, and Kato tells her the photos are of Clouseau's parents and that his father is still alive. Clouseau Sr. is a vintner, and as we see, some of Clouseau's personality quirks appear to be genetic.
Swine rabbit.
Blake, listen, we appreciate the effort, but honestly, random nudity is not enough to save the film at this point. Clouseau Sr. relates Clouseau's early life, revealing that Clouseau always wanted to be a policeman, and yeah, the strange events that always seemed to follow him were there since childhood. In college, he met the girl of his dreams, who married someone else, and caused Clouseau to attempt suicide.
To whom it may concern, I find life no longer worth living.
Fortunately,
Oh, merde.
there was a power of failure.
Swine lights.
Then, during Germany's occupation of France during World War II, Clouseau joined the French Resistance.
Swine plunger.
Contrary to popular belief, the actor playing Clouseau in this scene is not Alan Arkin. There were rumors that floated around for a while that it was, but these proved to ultimately be untrue. However, given the actor's general build and the style of his mustache in this scene, it's not hard to see how those rumors got started. But pretty much, yeah, that's it. After the war, Clouseau joined the police force, and, well, we know what happened after that. So, Marie returns to Paris to sum up what we've learned.
And so, after leaving that delightful old man, who is so firmly convinced that his famous son is still alive, I began to wonder, is it possible? Mafia boss Bruno Langlois seems to think it is. Sir Charles Lytton feels that such men are indispensable and therefore indestructible. And the Chief Inspector Dreyfus is so obsessed with the possibility that he's on the verge of another nervous breakdown. Did Inspector Clouseau really perish in the sea as reported? Or, for reasons as yet unknown, is he out there someplace, plotting his next move, waiting to reveal himself when the time is right? I am reluctant to believe that misfortune has really struck down such a great man.
Swine seagull.
And with that not very well executed cliffhanger, we come to the end of Trail of the Pink Panther. And yeah, this barely qualifies as a movie. The plot is paper thin, nothing is resolved, and the entire movie boils down to a collection of clips from better movies of the series and the worst tradition of clip shows from TV. Everyone in the movie does the best they can with the material, but there's not a lot here to work with aside from one or two scenes. And as a tribute to Peter Sellers, well, it's okay, but it's nothing special. And Sellers' widow hated this movie. She sued both UA and Blake Edwards for $3 million, claiming it defamed Peter Sellers' character. She was ultimately awarded $1 million. And in terms of box office, well, this became the first real flop for the series, earning only $9 million against a $6 million budget, which is really bad when you consider that a good third of this movie is made up of deleted scenes and clips from the other films. Nonetheless, the next film in the series was made at the exact same time as this one, so we're going to press on. When the government of France decides to determine if Clouseau is alive or dead, using simple logic. If France's greatest detective is missing, then get the world's greatest detective to find him. However, as is usual for this series, this will not go according to plan as Ted Wass steps into the limelight in his feature film debut, where we'll see if he can escape the curse of the Pink Panther. I'm Aaron Mills. Join me again next time as we continue our look at the legacy of the Pink Panther.